Hi, James. James, you're an important figurehead in the Willie Clancy Week for many years, but you come from an implacable background in music. Could you take us back to growing up in Drimnagh?
Well, in particular, coming here for this to talk to you today, I'm reminded of the room we're in at the moment, and it was back in 1957 at the very first Miltown Malbay County Clare Fla after the All-Ireland they had in Ennis the year before. Seán and myself were very, very small at the time, and Seán was playing well, but I was only thinking about it. I didn't pick out my instrument fully at that stage, but I had my eye on the accordion all the same. And because I was an upstart, I was a bit of a rebel, and growing up and being born into a fiddle, flute and pipes family, my personality decided that I have to upset this somehow, and I'll get to the root of it. So I got attracted to playing the accordion. Funny enough, after hearing Bobby Gardner's album as a little boy down in Clare, and one particular reel that he changed into, and I thought, even though I'd been friendly with Sonny Brogan and Bill Hart and Tony McMahon and everyone, it was whatever lift that he introduced me to. I liked that style, and that was the style that you would play for Clare sets, the lift, and it was so I that particular reel that I was impressed with Bobby playing that time. I even said it to him yesterday. I said that was enlightening to me, the way you took everything as if you were playing for sets, and that was, I set out to do something in common with you there. But yeah, born into a musical family with my mother, Mary Molly Keane from Newtown, Castle in County Longford. She was a lovely fiddle player, and my father, Patrick Keane from Lavalla, County Clare, and they met in Dublin. And in 1948, I showed up where they had bought the house in Drimnagh, and we were born into our music at the time. The music that was being played in our house, none of the neighbours up or either side of the road in Drimnagh knew what the hell it was. Because when people had stopped back after a game in Crow Park, we'll say, on their way home to the country, the musicians, and we'd have to open the windows in the sitting room because it was getting so hot with so many people, and the sounds of pipes would be going out onto the Errigal Road, out onto the street, and people they were confused. They didn't know what this music was. They didn't know what the sound of pipes were, uilleann pipes, and not only that, they couldn't understand why most of the cars outside had Longford number plates and Clare number plates, IX and IE, and they were all covered in white dust because their tar roads stopped outside of Dublin, and except the major roads, all country roads were dirt roads, and of course the cars would get covered in white dust. But they never saw that in where I grew up, because they were all, city slickers. Like, we were city people more so than country people, and so we were totally misunderstood for many, many, many years in Errigal Road. But not to any great degree of attack or anything like that. They let us go and play our music, whatever type of music it was, and we had. In the parish and in the neighbouring parish, we had musicians such as, you'd be like, as I was just saying to you earlier, you'd be lucky to know, most musicians would be lucky to know one of them. And we had regular visits to the house with Ceoltoiri Cualann on his way home from back and forth from London. Joe Burke as an 18-year-old coming in, and he'd stop off and play for my mother. My mother thought Joe Burke and Ceoltoiri Cualann were the grandest of men, mainly because they had the pioneer pin on. So that qualified them first off, because she was a 50-year pioneer person herself. I'm sorry I didn't take the same route, but anyhow, all these great musicians, Martine Burns would be there from time to time. And of course, local musicians like Sean Potts and Tommy Potts, his uncle, and Vincent Broderick would be around. I'm glad I thought of Vincent. It's hard to think of everyone's names, but I'll think of more names as I go along, because we were basically immersed in the music. And we, as I say, Sean and I, when we'd go out in the street to play with our schoolmates, there'd be a bit of tug and war there, because Tommy Steele and Elvis Presley had, in my view, had polluted our airwaves, because the only thing that was getting played on Radio Ireland in those days was imported American culture, which was already picked up by our neighbours in England, and then the youth and dance halls in Ireland picked up on that. And our Irish traditional music was only getting a 15-minute programme with Ciarán Mac Mahuna, the job at Journey work in those days, and if you missed it, you wouldn't get it till the same time next week. Queally House would be on all right for half an hour on a Saturday night. But other than that, it was a total American culture was being played on, an invasion of something that was plastic, with no tradition, no background to it. Now here we have music that we can, I once kind of overdid my specifications on how far back our music goes, and I was trying to impress this guy one night in New York, and I said, I recorded a tune now. I said it represents a battle that took place in 1014, for God's sakes. I said that was a while before New York was heard of, or America, and smarten up. You guys talk about 200 years of history. Sure, Jesus, that's only a half a day in equality in Ireland, So I just try to go along with what's old and new over there, but I know the source of it all, and we had to fight for our. I was often reminded of the song I did hear on the American radio, and it was Johnny Cash singing a boy named Sue. Well, that was the same as Sean and I met up with, because we were playing it was like they hadn't a clue what type of music, where we came from. But anyway, getting through all that, we had the Pipers Club on Thomas Street, and my father every Saturday evening would bring Sean and I as little lads down to the Pipers Club early on Saturday evening, and we'd watch it all build up, and he would take his seat in the back row of the musicians in the front room, and Jim Nolan would be telling us all what to do and keeping us in harmony there, and God bless him. And that's where I met a tremendous amount of musicians. There was a particular watering hole across the street, John Ryan. He was a concertina player from Tipperary, and when there'd be a decent break in the music, that'd be boys that slip across Thomas Street there and oil up for the next hour coming. And the only trouble with that was that if my father wasn't with us, and we'd have to run to get the last bus, which was 11:30, and often when we'd be going out the door to catch the last bus, a lot of these famous musicians would be only coming in, and we missed many a tune over that. But as we grew up, the people we knew during those days, I have memories of going into the Pipers Club and a great group of musicians in the front room. Then we had a back room to it, and it'd be a specific person that would grab that seat next to the fire, and it was all. You'd often walk back there, and you could meet Paddy Bawn O'Brien or Seamus Ennis or Desi O'Connor, and that was a special area back there. And then the Leo Rowsome's room up at the top of the stairs was also another solo duet room at the most, and we'd often go up there and sit down in another lovely room with a fire in it, and That was the room Leo taught his students to play. And we'd have John Kelly sitting there, and he'd play and play. He could play 2.5 hours straight of music. And as little lads, we'd be taking it all in. We'd be absorbing everything. And the thing was that if I didn't pick up on the first part of a tune, I might have had the second part. And then I'd hear Seán in the front room in the house, and he'd be attempting the first part on the fiddle, you see. So I'd earwig, and now I had the whole tune because he had the first part and I was after picking up the second part. We learned a lot of tunes like that. Mick, you and Seán and I gave Tilly Finn in your car a lift back to Fairview one night. And before getting out of the car, we asked her would she play a tune for us. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning in Fairview. And she just let the seat back and she used Seán's fiddle. And the Tilly Finn's was the one of the reels she played for us. And we had the same experience where I don't know whether you learned the second part of it we had the first part of it. But anyway, between the three of us, we put the jigsaw together. And it was the first time the tune had gotten out, because soon after that we played it on radio with the Castle, and it was all going out on Kieran's programmes and Queally House and that. And those years we with the Castle Ceili Band, and we had the great members of Joe Ryan and John Kelly, and our dear friend had just passed, John Dwyer, and Liam Rowsome, Leo Rowsome's son, was with us, and Seán, of course, and then we had Bridie Lafferty. There was no one could compare to the Bridie on piano, but especially with the treatment she gave on her left hand. It was a big thing for us, because it was almost like having a bass player in the band, because she was giving us that bottom line, you know, and plenty of drive. And those were the years that, when I'm away in America, these are the thoughts that I think about. They often get me through a tight squeeze when you're tested. Let it be in health or whatever. Everyone hits bumps on the road, and I can't say the last 54 years in New York have been an absolute thrill while I went to New York by any means. We had to fight for our way there many's the time, and but here we are, and we're able to come every year for the Willie Clancy, and it's a particular thrill for me, because I don't know if I finished that story that I was talking about being in this room. I think I jumped, but this particular room, my father had bought us comics because we were little lads. Out on the street, and as Junior Crehan was passing us on the street, Seán and I were sitting on the sidewalk outside under the lamp reading the comics after being hard going all day all over town, and we were tired, you know, and so he got us the comics so as we could relax and take it handy under the lamp. And Junior Crehan went past us, and he told Angela later that those two Keane boys are the best behaved fellas I've ever seen, you know. And she only told me that a few years ago, and I couldn't believe that it stood out in her memory so well that she praised us for it. But shortly after we moved in from the street lamp into this room, Paddy Kenny and Martin Mulhare were given a sort of a farewell concert, because the Tulla Ceili Band were going over to New York. It was 1957, and that's when they went over to make that record on Dublin Records, and the music is still as fresh as ever today. But after making that record, Martin Mulhare, Seamus Cooley, and Mike Preston decided to stay, and much to the surprise of the other members of the band. And I was speaking to Martin before he died, and in New York, and he was telling me that, you know, they thought it would be a nice start for himself and Carmel O'Mahony was his girlfriend at the time, and I don't know if they just had gotten married or well, it was around that time they got married, and Carmel was on the trip also, and they had decided to stay, and when he told me that on the Sunday that they were leaving, the rest of the band were going back to Ireland, he went out to the airport to just to see them off, and he said he never thought that he'd be so let down with lonesomeness when he saw Paddy Kenny and PJ Hayes and the boys all getting back on the plane to go home, and he had decided and Carmel to stay. And he said, he told me that he didn't get over it for close to 2 years, that he was slightly broken-hearted over it. And so parting is tough, and especially among musicians. We care for the music and love it so much.
Before you went to the States, you were heavily involved in the ballad scene here, which was a big phenomenon at the time.
It was. And you know, I was glad it came around, because I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have gone to America, only for that, the benefits I pulled out of that. And it all started, you were part of it, Mick, and Seán, and Mary Jordan. And when Peggy Jordan came and asked us to play open for the McPeaks for a week in the Grafton Cinema, we were only 10 and 11 years of age at the time, and my mother wouldn't allow us. She turned her down, and then Peggy convinced her to let us do it, and under the circumstances that we could take the last bus into Dublin and come home in a Mercedes Rhines taxi. And we were really excited about that. We were going to get a drive home in a Mercedes every night from Grafton Street. So my mother would go out and stop the bus every night and have a stern word with the conductor to let us off at the end of Grafton Street, these two little boys. And off we'd run up Grafton Street and sit down with Mick, and we were, all of a sudden there was 2 guests that came on the scene for the Thursday and Friday show. And they were in form of, they came in the form of Pete Seeger and Ewan McCall. And here I was, I can't say I was rubbing shoulders with these greats, but because I was too small, I couldn't have rubbed shoulders with them. But Pete Seeger, the reason Pete Seeger was there, he was after being taken off the blacklist. He was blacklisted in New York he was called communist and ever by the, what was the name of the guy? He was an Irish name too, but McCarthy's era. And he blacklisted Pete, and he'd just been taken off the list, and he decided to do his own little personal tour of Europe, and that's why he was in the Grafton those 2 nights. And I met him several times after that in Alabama and Tennessee, and I reminded him of that. And he wouldn't have remembered us, really. But he liked the McPeaks, and he was a wonderful man anyway. But I should be getting on with playing at the ballad scene during that time. Because all I had to do at the ballad scenes was open for, we'll say, in the Embankment for the Johnsons one night. And all I have to do was play for 10 or 15 minutes, 10 minutes only, with Joey Walsh. I had Joey Walsh as my partner on Bower On, another wild man. And I was just as wild as Joey in those days, on 2 wheels, going up through Blessington there and heading for the Embankment, Mick McCarthy's Embankment. And we'd rush out after playing for 10 minutes and head for the Old Shieling over across town, and stop in Christchurch, the Castle Inn in Christchurch on the way back, and McKeown's and Stony Batter, and then head right back up to the Embankment and close it. And then after that, there was probably a midnight concert on Liberty Hall, and after that, the folk clubs were open. They were going out till 3 o'clock in the morning. And so, and I was getting paid for all of these things, and I was loving it. So the standard, the money I was making was ridiculous. But I went off, one night I went out to the Embankment, or to the Old Shieling. I was off, and I was sitting in the lounge, and the owner, Bill Fuller, from Kerry. He owned all the dance halls in Dublin in those days, and the Gate and the Crystal and all those places. And he stopped with me at the bar and he says, James, you have a visa, as he says. He was from Lixna. And he said, do you have a visa? I said, no. I said, Bill, I've never been out of the country, you know. And he says, well, he says, I need you to get a visa by Thursday. Get your picture taken and get a visa. He says, I want you on a flight out of Dublin on Friday for New York. He says, I'm asking you to follow a band to New York who left from Shannon, and I think they just need another member, you know, to fill it in, to fill in the group. So I wasn't interested in asking who the band were, or as I joke, if it was a brass band, I was going to New York. I didn't care, you know. So I took off for New York, and when I got to the hotel, the instructions were there at the desk for me to go down a block to the city centre ballroom. That was the ballroom that all the emigrants went to, and it was so big, you could possibly land a 747 in the middle of the floor. It was so big. And they had this big square bar, and I swear it had to be 120 feet square. It was so big. And as I was coming down the approach stairs to that ballroom in the basement of City Centre, thank God I heard a fiddle and a flute tuning up. Well, I said, Jesus, no brass band here anyway, that's for sure. And I was delighted I was on the right track. And when I got down to the dance floor and looked up at them doing the sound check, there was Joe Burke, Paddy Carty, Kathleen Collins, Johnny Dury, I remember his name as the drummer. And here I am. I was only 18 at the time. And here I am, and I'm going to be touring with these great musicians, great company, to Boston and to Chicago after New York. Well, I tell you, by the time the 3 weeks were up, we knew each other fairly well, all right, and there was great crack now going around. And stories, I would often get calls, surprise calls from Joe Burke in New York. And this voice would say on the end of the phone, he'd say, Jamesy, he sometimes joked with me, calling me Jamesy. He'd say, you know, we have a situation here now in East Galway, and we have an empty seat in the band, the Loughrea Ceili Band. And he'd say, is there any chance you might come and take it? You know, it was Bill Fuller that came up with the name because of Joe being from Loughrea. He called the band the Loughrea Ceili Band. And Joe didn't even know it was called the Loughrea Ceili Band. But that was the joke. And every now and again, maybe 9-10 months ago, Joe would be on the phone. You never answered me about that vacancy in the Loughrea Ceili Band. I say, Joe, come on, you know, you're a great man, you're great fun. So, you know, friendships absolutely, what would you say, welded for good, totally welded. And like everything else, I don't know anyone outside of the music. I don't know anyone who doesn't like Irish music as a friend. That's my life, and my life is why I'm here. The music is why I'm here. Music is why I went to New York. The music was playing when I was born in the house, and Joe Cooley came to the house when I was 6, and you know, I can't express enough from my heart how much I love our music and everyone that plays it, and all gentle people. And we discovered that as young lads, and it was a credit really to the Pipers Club and to the Church Street. And Church Street was great because it was mainly Leitrim, Roscommon, Sligo, and that group. And they had such beautiful music, and they gave us the music, and we listened to it, and we it was a great part of our diet. You know, we loved it. Should have said on many occasions in the playing in those years in the 60s in the embankment, for example, if I was playing with the Johnsons that night, we'd all get on the stage at the same time and sit in a semicircle facing the audience. And also in that semicircle was Paul Brady, who was he wasn't part of the Johnsons at the time, but he was doing his own thing. And Paul would get up and he was doing a sort of not bluegrass, but in that line. And he'd be singing songs like I Gave My Love a Cherry, you know, but his guitar work and everything, phenomenal, like, you know, phenomenal. So one night, Joey Walsh didn't oblige me by showing up to play with me. And I was going to face it on my own. And everyone would have to stand up and go out to the mic, you see. So I stood up to go out to the mic. And as I was doing so, I turned to Paul. And I said, Paul, will you give me a few chords there, you know? I says, I don't know anything about that stuff, he said. I don't know Irish music. I said, give it a go, Paul, where it's a party, come on. So he had a go. And Paul has been so kind in addressing me as his source of Irish music ever since. Only lately he did another big interview on video, and he came out and the interview was almost all about me, almost. And it was, you're very grateful when you're living far away and you're so long gone, and it's lovely to be remembered. But Paul was special because I played with a lot of other musicians and they all forgot. But Paul never forgot. And he invited me even back for the time he was being inducted into the Hall of Fame of the National Concert Hall. And I was long gone before there was ever even a National Concert Hall. And he invited me back, and he invited Therese as well. And we were back for 5 days to do that show. And he called me out. I was almost blushing after his introduction on the hall. And I had that long walk out to the centre of the stage. And we belted it, and we got in. We played 2 selections of tunes, and then we were joined by Matt Malloy, and Seán came in from the other side, and that was truly an experience. And it was to get better because the President of Ireland was in the audience, and I had seen him several times on television. I was so proud of him, how he stood up and was able to tell senators in America and everywhere else where it was. He was so brilliant. The man was so brilliant, and he represented us all so good. It feel like standing up and saluting him after he ended the video. And when he came back to say hello to us, we had a big circle gathered. And of course, there was a bit of this going on, and this, because everyone wanted to get a clear view of what was going to happen, like with when the president came in. So next thing, here he comes, and he broke into the circle, and I kind of went, I looked this way, and I looked that way. He seemed to be coming my direction, like, you know, across the floor. And I said, must be, who's standing beside me that he's coming over to see? So he came over, he put his hand out, and he said, welcome home, James. And he shook my hand. And that to me was another lifetime happening that I didn't even think I was worthy of. He did that, this man. And then he turns around to me and he says, I was often in the audience, he says, in the embankment and the old shieling during the years you were popular around. And he says, I was often there clapping you on. Well, you know, fair is fair. Now I can retire. I can pack it in, you know. You can't get better than that.
Tell us about the musicians you met of the older generation in New York, James.
Yes, I was Ciarán McMahuna many years ago paid a visit to New York, and like he had in the trip he made to London, as young lads, when his quarter of an hour program would come on, Seán and I would find ourselves with our ears right stuck into the Pi radio over by the television set, because you weren't going to miss, and you'd have to be on alert because you'd have to learn it the first time. You didn't get a second chance. And that's what, that was the panic about these lovely tapes that Kieran made in New York. And he recorded Larry Redican and Paddy Reynolds and Charlie Mulvihill and all these great musicians who had kept it going throughout the years against the show band stuff, the Mother McCree stuff, you know. So anyway, what was I was approached by the National Endowment to put a group together for the 1986 commemoration of the Statue of Liberty, and it was also going to coincide with Op Sale, and so I had put many groups together for other occasions throughout the previous years in America, and I decided this time that, you know, another romantic idea, of course, and I decided this time, no, I won't ask the usual, you know, members, young people, my own age at the time, to take part. What I'll do is I'll ask the older musicians, and I'll maybe the likes of Jack Cohn, maybe he came through Ellis Island, maybe. So I'm beginning to get onto something. So into the lineup of the band was Andy McGann on fiddle, Paddy Reynolds fiddle, Jack Cohn. Dear Jack, and you see, I'm talking about real quality people here, and quite honestly, it's difficult to do it emotionally. But next to him was Mike Preston, and as little boys coming back from a flan in Ennis in 1956, and we were on the train, and who's walking up the tracks, tapping them and making sure everything was sound before the next train had come in. And Jesus, there was Mike Preston. And the next time I met him was in New York after that. And I knew his sister, of course, Viola, or was it his aunt, I'm not sure, with the Yemen Cant Ceili Band. But anyhow, that was Mike Preston. Then I had Matty Connolly on the pipes, and myself on the box. And then to fill it in with rhythm, I had a man called Jesse Winch playing baron, a man who lives in Washington now. So word got out about the band, and they asked me what I was going to call it. And the dream about Jack Cohn, you see, I said, well, let's call it the Ellis Island Irish Band, and we'll go with that. So word got out about this Ellis Island Irish Band, and the Independence Day was clashing with the Op Sale, and so we were invited to take part in the National Folk Festival the same day. It coincided with all this, and we put on a grand performance. But they had also asked me if I could possibly have the group sitting and ready to play on Governor's Island, which was only a 3-minute ferry ride to that island off the south of Manhattan, and to appear on the Today Show, the NBC Today Show. They thought it was a great idea. So as we're there, I was interviewed, and I was asked what the band were going to play, and I said, well, we're going to play Lady on the Island, and here's in the background of the shot the Statue of Liberty, and also ships are sailing, and here's all the big sail ships coming in behind us on this in the scene, you know. Now this Today Show is shown all over the world, and a lot of people who were the neighbours of Mike Preston and Jack Cohn and Andy McGann and all of them, Paddy Reynolds, had left, New York, and they'd gone to other parts of America. And when all of those gentlemen got home that evening, they were totally swamped with all their long time ago neighbours. who saw it on the television, and they couldn't believe that these men were still playing, and some of them even still alive. So it was it turned out to be such a fantastic treat that I was able to present the lads with. And of course everyone had their copy of the tape, and it was great. Everyone had appeared in the Today Show, so that was big time. It was when I was 6 years of age. My mother came to our bedroom, and Seán and I were small enough at the time indeed, and she brought us down. She woke us, because music was important to everyone in the house, thank God. And she brought us down to the fireplace where my uncle, who was a very close friend, Peter Hanley, Grand Piper himself, was a great friend of Joe Cooley's. And at 6 years of age, she brought us down, and here's Joe Cooley sitting beside this roaring fire, and he playing away. And that's the flash memory I brought with me to Los Angeles. I was going out to play there for a month one time, and of course the first weekend we had off, I made plans, and I realized that there was a shuttle service flying to San Francisco every half hour. And by God, I said I'd be on that, and I found out Joe Cooley's address in San Francisco. So I went up and made it to his apartment building, and at 2 o'clock in the day, I knocked on his door. Joe opened the door, and here's this young lad, and he's standing with an accordion and saying to him, Mr. Cooley, I'm the nephew of your long-time old friend, Peter Hanley, and you were often in my grandmother's house, May Hanley, in Newtown Castle in County Longford. Relative status already, you know. So come in. So we got in and sat down. About, I'd say shortly after 5 minutes, we were playing reels together and having a great time. And he was enjoying it so much that he decided he'd call his old friend Kevin Keegan. And it wasn't long before Kevin showed up. And I have a famous picture that it was taken, a Polaroid picture of us before we broke up that night. And it's of Joe, Kevin, and myself. And there was a few Budweisers under the belt and all that stuff. But I have an actual picture which I never posted, and it's the comrade of the one I used, but it's of Kevin Keegan. After we, at the end of the night, we were all in a jolly fashion. And here's Kevin, and he putting on the accordion to play the last set of tunes for the picture. And he's putting it on upside down. And he has the bass over this side, So I didn't show that. I wouldn't, no one will see that picture. But I have it myself. And he brought me down, he called me a taxi. And we went down to the street to wait for the taxi. And while we were waiting, we were about to say goodbye to each other. And Joe came to me, and he put his hand out, and I shook his hand to say goodbye. And he pulled me into him, and he gave me this hug. And he softly spoke. He says, James, it's possible I won't ever see you again. Well, I said, Joe, that's very bad news you're giving me now at this stage of the game. I said, I don't know why you said that, but that was 1969. And 1973, he died. A very, very, very young man. It was shocking. And then some years later, good old Kevin followed the same path, and it's once again it's heartbreaking. Yeah, most musicians growing up in Ireland, and I found myself, I was so young, and Seán was so young playing, that most of the musicians we were playing with in Church Street, they were all about 15 years older than us, because there were no young people playing instruments at that time. None. There wasn't another fiddle player, box player, or flute player, except Liam Flynn on the pipes. At that age, there was playing music in Dublin. It was almost outlawed. It wasn't on the radio. It wasn't a popular thing to do. And as the joke goes, we played Irish music when it was dangerous. I'll tell you, the honest God's truth, it was dangerous, because we would get off the bus I'm going back to the Piper's Club again, but we'd often get off the bus and have to walk up through the liberties of Francis Street and Meath Street on a Saturday evening, and the summer evening, bright, with two fiddles and an out-of-date accordion, you know. And we'd hear all about it on Monday from the Teddy Boys when they were hanging out in the storefront when we were going up the road. But anyway, back in the days of competitions and all that with cultists, and there was always, it was all right. I never agreed much with competition, but it would have been fairly all right if we had adjudicators that understood what they were adjudicating. That was the problem. You know, I often had, we would, during the year, Mick and Seán would go back and they'd dig out these tunes that hadn't been heard in a century and rub the cobwebs off it and surprise the audience at the Ceili Band competitions and everything else. Well, there was one time, well, not only one time, but this particular time, we were judged by a piccolo player who didn't know which end of the stick he was at. And definitely we lost that. We were disqualified, actually, because we played a jig march and a set of jigs. And he got up in his adjudication, and he estimated that we played 2 sets of jigs. So he disqualified the Castle Ceili Band from that. And warts and all, there's still an awful lot taught of the old Castle Ceili Band that was popular in the 60s when we won the All-Ireland in 1965 in Thurles. That was after a lot of perseverance. But anyway, I wondered about a way around this. And of course, Mick, you and Seán got on the committee in the Pipers Club. And that was 2 seats for the county board. But there was no seat for me, not even a stool. And I said to myself, how can I get into those meetings in the 4 courts when they meet every month? So what I decided to do was, I went over to Sonny had died at the time, Sonny Brogan, and I went over to Sonny's wife, and I asked her for permission to use Sonny's name as the name of the branch in the Drimnagh, in the parish I lived in, and she granted it. And so it was going to be the Sonny branch, the Sonny Brogan branch of cultists in Drimnagh. So I came up with a few bob, and I was able to put a new floor in the schoolhouse in Scoil on the Crumlin Road, and we nailed it down with the help of Mr. Garvey. He was a carpenter, and he knew the amount of wood to order, and the truckload of wood came, and he showed us. Johnny McNamara, Lord rest him, grand neighbour and box players passed on. We'd always meet him here at the Willie. And one of the founding members also of the original Castle Ceili Band, Johnny McNamara. And we got the floor down and everything else, and I set the night for the opening. And when I had gotten through asking people who knew Sonny to come and just say a nice few words about him, I had Tommy Potts, I had John Kelly, I had Bill Hart, who was Tony McMahon, thank you. Who would you have? But that's the caliber of musician friends that he had. And each one stood up and spoke dearly about Sonny and how dear he was to them. And to have witnessed all this, I was really in the middle of it all. Like, you know, so were you, Mick, and so was Seán. And no wonder we find it hard to explain when we see people who take our tradition with a grain of salt, because it's stronger than that. There's blood and guts in it. It's not just you ask somebody where they got the tune. I learned it off a CD. Well, I'm sorry, you're disqualified. That's not good enough. You should know more about your tune or where it came from. Well, and if it's not that one, well, you should know about the next one as well. So I always proceed to say what's on my mind. And I think I'm getting more dangerous as the years go by, because since I retired from a job I had to take due to sickness back then, I stayed in the job for 27 years. But when I retired, I said, I certainly now at this stage of my life don't answer to anybody. So I'm going to just say what's on my mind. If you like it, okay, and if you don't buy me records, or don't turn off the radio if I'm on it. But I'm fine with that. So I'm gonna tell you how it is and how it was. In 1970, I think it was, or just after going to the States, I was invited to go into New York to play on a record. They were giving me one side of a CD and the other side for other musicians. So Felix Dolan was playing the piano. So when I found a studio, it was on 42nd Street, and it was one of the old type studios that you would see in the black and white movies years ago, of the big dance bands, and they're sitting behind the name of the band and all that in glorious big studios. So I found a studio and I walked into it, and as I was going in the door, I heard the practicing going on of Charlie Mulvihill and Paddy Reynolds, and they're going through their tracks, and Felix Dolan backing them. And I thought, jeez, that's the nicest music I've heard in a long time. They played so well together. And the record was called, originally, Sweet and Traditional Music of Ireland. And then it was reissued years later, and they changed the name to it, The Rolling Wave. Same as the program on RTE. But before the program, it was back then. So here, as I say, that was my link. These are the guys that I had heard Ciarán Mac Mahuna play on the radio as we used to rush in to stick our ears into the radio. And here's two heroes sitting right in three heroes, because Felix. And total pleasure and nervous and everything else. We made a record anyway, and I became very friendly with Charlie, and later his son is a very dear friend of mine, Tommy Mulvihill. So there's great continuity. It keeps coming, you know, even though Charlie is long gone. And but you know, all these characters came alive when I stepped out of the radio, you know, and we were all so very close. And then Felix and myself played for many years together when the sets became popular over there, and we play most weekends 4 hours continuous, just him and I, with a really good system, and we rock it, you know. We're total reels, more reels, and a couple of jigs, more reels, and it was always a great workout for me. And you leave the place a couple of pounds lighter and all that stuff, but it was heartwarming, and it was great to be playing with such a great man as Felix Dolan, and who accompanied everybody along the road, you know, Joe Burke and Andy and everybody. So we had real quality people as well as musicians, and as I say, all very kind people, and that's what I was used to. You know, the music has been everything to me, along with my Kerry wife, Teresa, after 54 years, and 53 years, I should say. I'll hear about that from the Kerry woman when I step out. But Teresa and I have been through the mill, and we have had a lovely life together. We have had such joy. We have two great sons, and every year around April or May, I'm sure to say to Teresa, listen, Teresa, do you think it's time to book the fares for Ireland again? Now, it's strange, but over all those years, 54 years in New York, we never once, with all the advertisements for the Caribbean and Australia or wherever you'd like to go, we never once considered going anywhere else. That must be a record, because not everyone that goes to England will say, comes back to Ireland every year. They tend to go to France or somewhere else. But here we are. And in 2012, having been here at the 57 Fleadh, again at the 61 Fleadh, and I put up a picture recently on the thing of Seán and myself playing in the square here in Miltown in 1961, and we're playing for sets. You can see the people dancing on the ground, on the street in front of us, and we're above, and my son Brendan cropped our heads because it wasn't that clear, and he pasted it back onto the big picture of us in the distance, and then he could see us, and there we were, the two whiteheads, and we above on the stage bashing it out. And in 61, that would have made me 13, and Seán was 14. But we stayed on the stage till we finished playing for the set. And so here I am. I was invited back in 2012 to say something, to give a talk. And it was wonderful because it gave me the opportunity to remember people that I was familiar with from throughout the years here in Miltown Malbay. And when I spoke, besides telling them about our holidays every first 2 weeks of August, I was able to tell them stories about Joe Keane down in Queally and JC Talty and Pat O'Loughlin and Junior Crean, and all these. I was able to bring people in from Kilmel, where we had Seán McNamara, who would be back from Liverpool. He emigrated to Liverpool and he'd be back on holidays. Mick McGuan, our old friend, and his brother Kevin McGuan from Kilmehel, and then a range of musicians around Miltown and Quilty. And we'd come down, after coming home from America, we'd come down to, especially just to go to Quilty, to Mike Casey's bars. He owned it, but it was two bars, he owned both of them. So he was a winner, and but he was a grand man, and we'd go over to, he'd ask us to leave at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Before we left, he'd go to the bar and he'd take all the bottles off the top shelf and put them into a soap box, a cardboard box of Tide or something, whatever the box was, and he'd give it to Marty, the set dancer, if I could only think of his second name, the nicest man.
O'Malley.
Marty O'Malley, yes. And he'd give it to Marty, and we'd go over to to his house, one of the fishermen cottages, and we were good for another 3 or 4 hours then, and there was a man, PJ Downs, that lived on the street here. He lived up from Jimmy Ward's shop there, and PJ had a bed and he used his house as a bed and breakfast. So what we would do is we'd come down to Quilty, drop in. I'd jump in and I'd say, "We're going up to check into the thing," and I'd look at the door. The place would be mobbed because we were after calling them before we left Dublin to say we were coming down for a tune. Jesse Owens and myself, who was my partner at the time, a lovely fella, a great guitar player and singer, and we travelled together for about 12 years. So we'd ramble down and go up then to the check-in, PJ Downs' drop our bags and fly back down to Quilty Road for the start of the night. And God, we knew everyone. Like we knew, I was as common as the local cat here during those years. You know, one night we came into this particular place, and it was a November night, and there was Willie, and Martin Talty, and Jimmy, and no one else, and the owners, and that was it. It was a very quiet night, and as we were having a few tunes and many laughs, the door almost blew open. It was such a windy night, a winter night, and who came in but Aggie White and her husband. I know his name, but I can't think of it. And but they had a little act with their two daughters, and they would go and they'd go to town halls and they'd go to libraries and that. And Aggie would play while her husband played the bodhrán beside her, and the two girls would dance, and that was the act. And so they came in the door that night, and great memories. Except when I was invited back in 21. I hadn't been to the Willie Clancy because even though I had come back every year, it was at a different time. I was a professional musician, so I had to come back. If I was doing a tour, I just couldn't. It was a different time of the year. I couldn't attend my friend's festival, Willie Clancy's festival. So it was years later when I came back for it in 2012. I found my way into Friels, and I was thinking of how long it was since I was last in Miltown Malbay, and how much everything had changed, and how I was the only one, and Jesse in America, that was survived after all that. And so once again, we're bugged by our memories in a way, and I find it a liability that when I got sick a couple of times there in the past, when I recovered, I used to say, Jesus, you have to tell this to somebody. You know, I'm still working on that, but I realise how important it is because they're all my stories, and no one else was there, so you have to believe me too, you know. And so, God bless the music, and God bless everyone that plays it, and God bless all the people we met years ago who encouraged us to play it and were so kind to us. Thank you.